This happened to me about 7 years ago. Some relatives passed away, and my father inherited one of their houses. They were wealthy. They had 3 properties that were distributed among their closest relatives. My father was one of them. The property he inherited was the largest but also the oldest. It was a Victorian house with 8 rooms located in a small village on the outskirts of the city. They had another apartment downtown where they spent their last years, so they hadn't used the big house for a long time. However, someone would occasionally come to maintain it, so I assumed we would find it in good condition. We had no interest in living there, so my dad decided that the best alternative was to sell it. I had only gone a few times as a child, and my dad hadn't visited it since they moved to the city. It was our duty to go check it out and assess its condition before putting it up for sale. We planned to go together to spend a strictly inspection weekend and fix some flaws. But due to work reasons, my dad had to stay in the city and asked me to go ahead, insisting that he would arrive on Sunday to help me. I arrived Friday afternoon at the old house and gave it a quick look before settling into one of the rooms. It looked very good despite the accumulated dust. Apparently, no one had come to perform maintenance for a while, but at least all the furniture was covered with fabrics. I left my things in a second-floor room and went downstairs to uncover all the furniture. The house had an incredible wooden staircase that gave it a commanding air, with several ups and downs and very spacious landings where I found what I remembered most from my visits as a child. 4 giant mirrors, so old that I couldn't deduce their creation date. There they were, hanging on the walls, only this time they were covered with white fabrics to preserve them. I carefully removed the fabric. Although they were clean, you could clearly see the passage of time on them. The frames were well preserved, maintaining their shape and some color, but the mirrors themselves had worn irreparably, full of rust and dark stains. They really seemed to reflect a different reality, blurry, opaque, and deformed. I stayed for a while reflecting in the mirrors, noticing that none of them reflected me correctly. One in particular caught my attention. It was the oldest of the 4, as it was so worn and opaque that it almost reflected nothing except my silhouette and some of my features. I continued with the task of checking the house for a moment, but I decided to go to bed early that day to start repairs on Saturday morning. The next day, as I headed downstairs, I noticed a dark silhouette in the oldest mirror. I passed by it without giving it much thought, thinking it was a stain from the time that I might have overlooked the afternoon before. I worked on the house during the day, and when I went upstairs in the afternoon, I noticed that silhouette again in the mirror. I stopped to look and was shocked to see that the shape of my body fit exactly into that shadowy silhouette. I could see my features as if somehow, when reflecting, they had been imprinted on the glass. But the strangest thing was that, no matter how much I moved, the reflection didn't move. I went to look at myself in the other mirrors, and I reflected normally, only with some deformities that I attributed to curvatures formed in the mirror over the years, but everything within normal limits. I went back to the oldest mirror, and my reflection was still there, as if it had a life of its own and refused to leave. I approached it when suddenly I felt a buzzing in my ears, and the mirror began to shake. My immediate reaction was to step back. The mirror kept shaking, and it shook more and more. It seemed as if it intended to shake off my reflection from the glass. I was petrified, not knowing how to react. After a while, I could see how my silhouette printed on the mirror was fading like a mist, slowly, as the mirror stopped shaking. I don't know how long all that lasted, probably just a few seconds, but it really felt like an eternity. The fact that it stopped shaking did not make me feel calm. Without thinking of approaching the mirror, I ran upstairs, locking myself in my room with the sole intention of gathering my things and leaving that house. I couldn't do it immediately. The only way out of the house was through those stairs, which meant I would have to pass in front of the mirror, and that was something I didn't even want to think about doing. I wanted to call my dad, but I had left my cell phone downstairs, and the house's landline wasn't enabled. All in all, somehow, I felt safe in my room, so I decided to stay there until morning. On Sunday morning, everything felt calmer, but I was still terrified to know that I had to pass in front of the mirror to leave. I grabbed the sheets from my bed and went downstairs without looking at it, trying to use the sheet as a kind of protection between the mirror and me. I didn't want to see if my reflection was still imprinted on the glass. I approached it and, without looking, covered the mirror. I went down quickly and stayed on the ground floor waiting for my dad. I felt calmer when he arrived, but I didn't dare to tell him what had happened. Luckily, he quickly decided to hire a company to completely redecorate the house. That was a great relief for me, as I wouldn't need to return. Days after the remodeling, I asked my dad about the mirrors. He told me that the company he hired had taken care of selling all the old furniture. I never heard about the mirrors again, but I still wonder whose hands they ended up in.
In 2017, I ran a small bookstore with my friend Jessie. We loved decorating it with antique items, and whenever we had some extra cash, we explored stores for new decor pieces. That day, I remember Jessie was very excited and urged me to hurry up to get to a garage sale we'd been waiting for. We wanted to arrive before anyone else to snag the treasures we'd seen on a Facebook ad weeks before. One item in the ad caught my eye: a beautiful full-length mirror. We were already running late, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and fear, worried that the mirror might already be sold. We wanted to have that mirror in the bookstore no matter what. When we arrived, we entered a crowded space filled with all sorts of items. Despite our excitement, we couldn't spot the mirror anywhere. I asked Jessie if she saw it, but she couldn't find it either. It seemed like someone had already bought it. I decided to ask the owner if he still had it stored somewhere. I approached him. He was a tall man with blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. I showed him a photo of the mirror and explained my interest in having it. He recognized the piece and said it was inside his house, where his mother had kept it. He invited us in. Inside, we entered an old kitchen with a strong, musty smell, where a frail old woman sat. She looked worn out and fragile. She had almost no hair, and her skin seemed rubbery. Her eyes were wide open, as if she had just seen a ghost. The man asked her about the mirror and if we could buy it. The old woman abruptly turned her head towards me and said in a hoarse voice that didn't seem to belong to her body, "You can't have it. Go away." That made Jessie and me very uncomfortable. We stepped back, realizing there was more to the situation than met the eye. The man apologized for his mother's behavior and said she wasn't well. He handed us the mirror, urging us to take it quickly. I asked about the price, but he said, "Just take it, quickly. I have to get back to my mom." I was surprised, but I took it anyway. All of that left us very uneasy and curious. We took the mirror back to our apartment, and once inside, we placed it in my room in front of my bed. Jessie was puzzled by what had happened, and I agreed, but I couldn't help but feel excited about the mirror. We admired the dark golden frame and intricate designs, pondering its true value. The unexpected and suspicious generosity of the man in giving it to us for free puzzled us. However, we chose to focus on its beauty instead. That night, as I was about to sleep, I happened to glance at the mirror and saw movement in it. My heart started pounding as I sat up, staring at it. Immediately, I put on my glasses and could distinguish a girl in a white nightgown reflected in the mirror. I blinked, hoping it was just my imagination, but she was still there. She was very real. I had never felt so much fear in my life, as I had never experienced anything like that before. I tried to call out to Jessie, but my voice wouldn't work. I could only emit a choked sound, as if an invisible hand were strangling me. The girl in the mirror smiled, looking directly at me with a cold expression. Her eyes were heavy and seemed intoxicated. I struggled, desperate to break free, but I couldn't. And at that moment, I could see the silhouette of that girl peeking out of the mirror, like a window from her world to mine. I could see my room getting darker and darker. Reflexively, I could only close my eyes. I could hear her approaching, but I didn't want to see her. I wished I could cover my ears at that moment and pretend she wasn't there, but I couldn't move. I knew she was close, and at that moment, I heard her speaking to me. I didn't understand clearly what she said. Her voice sounded very deep, and I refused to believe what was happening was real. I guess I passed out at that moment because the next thing I remember is finding myself on the floor, gasping for air. The room was quiet, and the mirror no longer reflected the girl I had just seen. Jessie entered my room very confused and helped me up. I ran to the living room without looking back and told her what had happened. I couldn't stop trembling, and I could remember and understand what the girl had said to me. "This mirror doesn't belong to you. Return it." At that moment, we knew the mirror held something sinister, something the old lady knew. With trembling hands, we wrapped the mirror in cloth, sealing it, determined to protect ourselves from that ever happening again. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. The next morning, we returned to the old lady's house and simply left the mirror at the entrance and left without saying or asking anything.
Subscribe to the channel to hear the strangest stories of encounters with the unknown. I'll tell you the best tales of horror, mystery, and suspense. When whispers and shadows lurk in the darkness, the time for nightmares has come.
About a year ago, I moved to an apartment older than the one I had. I was looking for an affordable place to live, and luckily, I found one. I got it at a very low price and moved in quickly. The apartment was small and old, with one bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, and a TV lounge. It took me 2 days to set everything up and make it a comfortable place to live. After getting everything settled, I decided to take a bath. When I stepped out of the shower, I noticed something in the bathroom mirror, the word "hello" written in the steam. It surprised me a lot, and although I was a bit shocked, I was too tired to think about it at that moment. I left it as it was, simply ignored it, and didn't give much importance to how it could have happened. The next morning, after cleaning the bathroom, I walked past the mirror and had a strange sensation that my reflection wasn't moving. I stopped and went back to check, but everything seemed normal. I waved my hand to test it out, and everything seemed perfectly fine. I didn't pay much attention to that strange moment and headed off to work. A few days went by, and some strange things started happening inside the apartment. Some nights while I was sleeping, I woke up by the sound of the bathroom door closing. As I approached, I heard a horrible cry and the sound of the shower. When I finally gathered the courage to enter the bathroom, there was nothing there, not even the wet shower floor. I preferred to think that those noises were coming from another apartment, but deep down, I knew that something in mine just wasn't right. I always had this strange feeling of being watched, and it made me very uneasy. Despite those strange occurrences continuing to happen, I chose to ignore them. After all, nothing major was happening, and I couldn't afford to move to another place just because of those small impressions. A week later, I invited my friends to a small party in my new apartment. While at the gathering, I excused myself to use the bathroom. When I was washing my hands, the lights suddenly went out. I thought it was one of my friends playing a prank, so I started naming them to stop playing around, but there was no response or laughter. Moreover, when I realized it, I didn't hear any noise in the apartment, neither the music nor the conversations between my friends. It seemed as if everyone had suddenly left. At that moment, I was about to leave the bathroom, but something in the mirror caught my eye. Everything was very dark, but something could be seen thanks to a faint streetlight coming through the window. I saw a shadow. It was someone or something lurking in one of the corners of the bathroom. I quickly turned around, expecting to see someone behind me, but the space was empty. With a lot of fear, I looked back at the mirror, and there it was, or she was. A woman in a dirty, old, torn white dress with messy hair covering her face. I heard her whisper my name with a horrible voice that made my whole body shiver and my blood pressure drop. At that moment, almost falling, I ran out of the bathroom, bumping into some of my friends. I was terrified, and I told them that someone was in the bathroom. They rushed in to check, but they found nothing. The lights turned back on by themselves. Trembling with fear, I insisted that someone was in there, describing what I had seen. Due to my nervousness and paleness at that moment, they had no doubt to believe me, as I would never have been able to act that way as a joke. Despite their words of encouragement upon not finding anyone, I knew that I had encountered something inexplicable in that bathroom. The next morning, I hesitated to return to that bathroom. I still remembered that woman, and to be honest, I was very scared to face her again. Despite feeling scared, I had to go back to the bathroom to get ready for work. So I gathered my courage and entered. Everything was normal, and nothing unusual happened. Not even a strange movement occurred. At that moment, I tried to convince myself that maybe I had been imagining things the night before due to the alcohol from the party. However, as I was about to leave, I noticed another message written in the steam on the mirror. This time it said, "Come here." I froze with fear again. I couldn't understand how someone could be writing those messages on the foggy mirror. In addition to being frightened, I felt very upset. I didn't want those messages to disturb my life. I moved my hand slowly forward to wipe it with my hand and make those words disappear. But at that moment, a dark, burnt, bony hand with long nails emerged from the mirror and grabbed my wrist. I had never felt so much panic. I tried to pull it away, but that hand was too strong. It moved my arm from side to side as if I were its puppet erasing the words from the mirror. And no matter how hard I pulled towards me, I only heard the squeak of my hand rubbing against the damp glass. I quickly stepped back with all my force, managing to free myself successfully. When I looked at my arm, I noticed that it was burned in the area where the hand had grabbed me. I looked back at the mirror, and there was nothing there. It was just my reflection, but now it stared at me with a very angry expression. That was my breaking point. I ran out, terrified, changed my clothes, grabbed my backpack with everything I could fit, and left the place immediately. I didn't even go back to collect the rest of my belongings. Instead, I asked one of my friends to do it for me. I still can't explain what I experienced. I no longer have the hand mark on my arm. Many times, I thought about taking pictures of it, but I didn't want to keep any memories of that experience.